Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of, this could be a chicken and egg thing, but did the decline in Christian values across the West, did that create the opening, create the vacuum, if you will, the void into which the insane globalist woke-ism and affirmative action and the all that sort of stuff, did that could that have made the inroads it did if Christianity had been strong and in place and had the sort of social binding effect that it had previously? Were there other forces at work? Were there many forces? Are the reasons many and varied? So let's just have a little look at that. Now, the decline in Christianity, church attendance, call it what you will. I saw this. I remember as a kid in early school, there were a lot of Christian-related things. We were encouraged to sing. Various psalms and hymns that contained within them religious observance, things such as various religious occasions, whether it be Christmas or Easter or Lent or various other sort of events on the Christian calendar. They were observed at school, and we were encouraged to observe them. Priests and so on would regularly come around to the school to give sermons and so on. Now, by the time I got to high school, say first year high school, that still was a bit of that around. Religion was a compulsory subject. I think there was only maybe 2 lessons a week that. Where religion was compulsory, so it wasn't. But there were still observances around that would indicate and suggest the Christian element of things, and mention of the scriptures, indirectly and so on was around. So it was certainly there, but diminishing, and it was observed. I could observe it even at that age that it was diminishing. By the time I got, I think, to 3rd year high school, religion was optional. So you didn't have to attend any religious classes if you didn't want to. And they gave, I think it was an option in maybe 3rd or 4th year high school, where you could either have that lesson as a study time, or you could attend, the religious thing. So it was already diminishing, and other various teachers, and I going back now, they were prominent in the teachers' union, and they would speak with some derision about religion, and using, say, Marxist principles. Like Marx believed that religion was just opiates, sedatives for the masses, and this was something that union organisers and teachers, heavily influenced by the teachers' union, particularly the female, not so much the men, but the female teachers, like this idea of so in novels that we were studying in English, for example, I remember a particular female teacher would speak negatively about religion. Now, why did these activists, Marxists and unionists? Well, there's a few things. They saw religion as opiate to the masses, but also because God was male, priests were male, and it was a patriarchy in that sense. Head of the households were male at that time. So this was seen as really the oppression of the patriarchy. It wasn't creating the social. It wasn't the Marxist paradise on earth that the Marxists envisioned, and really the power of men had, religion and the power of men, patriarchy, family, head of family, all that had to be broken up if this paradise, this socialist Marxist paradise, was to be achieved. So in that sense, religion was already under attack from various corners, including through the education system. Now, it wasn't overt, it was quite covert, and it was being undermined very slowly, I think. Or, well, I suppose quickly in the overall scheme of things, but being undermined in small ways, making religion an optional subject and not celebrating Christmas and not celebrating Easter. For example, when in junior school, again, in first year high school, there was the nativity scene, baby Jesus in the manger and all that sort of jazz was every year that would be done. We would have art classes where we would create nativity scenes, and it would be explained to us, and a priest would come in and with much solemnity, tell us about Jesus and the three wise men and the three kings and so on. Now, I can look back now and say, well, this was really a parable and meant to be symbolic of things. But nonetheless, it was that's how it was. And when you have religious observance, you believe there is a divide between good behavior, the 10 Commandments, 7 deadly sins, all that sort of thing. And it gives you does it give you a moral framework that you could rely on or look towards in absence of good examples around you, such as family members. And so it was already being chipped away. It was already being undermined. Now, even when I was a kid, there was a politician was standing for election or something like that, and it was revealed that they did not go to church on Sunday. And this was considered, when I would have been, I don't know, probably first year high school, I guess. That was considered to be, it was like a crescendo burst across the news landscape. Here's a politician wanting to have high office, to occupy high office, who didn't go to church on Sunday. Are you kidding? No way. And the response was vehement, beyond measure. Also, I was probably in senior high school at this stage, and the government was going to, in Australia, was going to bring out a tax on books. It was like just a revenue-raising exercise, but they're going to bring out a tax on books. And the rumour, or it may have been true, I don't know, but the word went around that the government was going to tax the Bible, actually put tax on God's book. And the place was in uproar. And politicians were falling over themselves to go onto the news networks and the current affairs show. Of course, we never meant to tax the Bible. No, we never considered. We would never consider doing that. What a mistake! What a misunderstanding! We should have been clearer. But let me say now to everybody, the Bible will not be taxed under any circumstance. And these were the sort of, and you could see they were flustered. They were, gagging to get in front of the camera and do this. Such was the response. Now, you'd hear a whimper today if that same thing. So this is all within my lifetime that religion, the role of religion, the practice of religion was diminishing. Fewer and fewer people were going to church. Now, there are also other aspects of it. For example, there was Sunday was considered to be the Sabbath day. God rested on the seventh day, and this was considered quite serious up until probably up until I was in my early 20s, I guess, something like that. But the idea of shops being open on a Sunday, you could go down a street on Sunday, and the city street that's normally bustling and bodies peeling off from all directions. You go down the street on Sunday, and there wouldn't be anybody there. It would be like a ghost town. And I don't know if any of you have heard of quite a famous singer. He recently died, actually, called Chris Christopherson, and he was writing about a song called "Sunday Morning Coming Down." He was walking through the city, and there was no one around. It was a Sunday. Everybody was at church or now it's considered that and as a kid I was dragged to church and Sunday school rather unwillingly. But anyway, went along to church, and the morning on Sunday was considered that you went to church. That's when you dressed. I don't know if we've ever heard of the term, you're wearing your Sunday best because you were going to church, and you couldn't turn up looking dishevelled or so you had to wear good clothes. And I had a set of clothes as a kid. I had a set of clothes that were for church, for going to church. That was how it was viewed. Anyway, this all changed now. So it gradually diminished. Now, at the same time as religion and religious observance and so on was diminishing, Sunday trading, shop trading came out. So people would rather go to the shop and buy consumer goods than go to church. So this changed attitudes and views, but gradually over time. And at the same time that was going on, that the religious observances or level of observance was declining. At the same time, things like affirmative action were creeping in from the other side. So one side you had diminishing, but almost simultaneously, and I think they're related, but simultaneously you had affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion those things were already beginning. There were, again, through the education system, teachers saying, well, we must have equal outcomes between boys and girls. That will create a fairer society. That will be a step towards this utopia, this nirvana, which is always just around the next corner. And these are the social engineering things we had to do to create this imagined paradise, which has, of course, remained elusive since then. Probably my biggest awakening to how religion was being viewed in the establishment was, and I mentioned this before, I was VP of new product development at this particular technology company, and I had a lot of very smart guys working on the team, range programmers, scientists and technicians and so on. And these guys were on big bucks, and youngish guys on big bucks, and they were getting divorced, or they would have like a live-in girlfriend who would decide to sue them for money if the relationship fell over. And these guys were, the stories they were telling me about how they're being treated, I just didn't believe when I first heard it. I thought there's no way any court of law would behave that way. Judges wouldn't behave. There is no way that politicians would allow this. Now, bear in mind, this is 25 plus years ago, and there were these. So I decided to go down into the court and look for myself. I was losing. It was really disrupting the product development. Like, we were really falling behind because I was losing so many guys to this. Only one guy, he'd been there, and he'd got some girl pregnant at a party when he was 17. He'd paid for her to get an abortion, but she kept the money and kept the kid anyway. And she was from miles away and just happened to be at that party. I don't know if he really was. I think they shopped around to see which guy could it have been and which one had the highest income. The highest income must be him. I wouldn't be surprised that was him. Nonetheless, they wanted to hit him up with something like 15 years of back child support, including some alimony and all other bits and pieces. He'd have been financially ruined. So, I lost that. So anyway, I went into the court and I wandered into one court where the guy getting divorced was a Christian. I'm not sure how devout. I don't think he was, but he was, he was quite clearly a Christian, and I was amazed at how they went after him for this. They would, every time they would set him up with it. This is the barrister or the lawyer. They'd set him up with a question so it would automatically lead to his Christian beliefs, and then they would laugh at him. They were jeering at him, sniggering at him. I couldn't believe what was happening, all because he was a Christian, and they absolutely went after him just because he was a Christian. Because he's a Christian, the patriarchy and the oppression. And it was all ideological. They were chasing him on a purely ideological basis. The guy had done nothing wrong, purely because he was a Christian. They attributed to him, the most terrible sort of accusations and thoughts. But again, the burden of proof they needed to meet to make out this Christian was a bad guy was zero, whereas the burden of proof he had to meet to disprove their flaky allegations was a very high burden of proof he had to meet. And I was staggered at the way they treated. I thought it was a one-off. I just thought there was the judge just happened to be an activist and the people there just happened to be. I just thought that was a one-off. This can't be representative, but it was, and this was an early indicator that I saw in a court of law, or a supposed court. This is divorce court, a supposed court of law where just because the guy was a Christian, they were hounding him. Again, the treatment of him, so they were sneering and sniggering at him, jeering him. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, the contempt they had for this guy, any form of natural justice was thrown straight out the window. But this was, again, an example of how the state would increasingly treat Christianity and particularly Christian men. There's another case where a priest, one of the most senior priests in Australia, the government wanted a scalp. The leftist regional government, they wanted a scalp. And they were determined to get it. And the evidence and due legal process, and it's sort of be damned, who gives a fuck? We're going after a Christian patriarchy Nazi. And so they went after this guy, threw him in prison. I mean, the legal cost of him defending himself against these false allegations ran into the millions. And fortunately, he was a benefactor, supported him, and he was exonerated fully. And it physically was impossible for him to have committed those crimes. So it means that they not only are prepared to invent crimes, but prepared to, as we've seen in the cases that are going after Trump in the United States, they're more than prepared to fabricate evidence and corrupt judicial officers, and so more than prepared to do it. In fact, they believe they're obliged to do it. Now, the Soviets and the communists, because it's coming back to the Marxist take, they believe that the family and religion were two of the biggest obstacles to them having ideological control of the populace. And we see this today. The globalists are using that same playbook. The family and religion, Christianity are the big obstacles. Interestingly, they don't believe the same about Islam. Now, I was recently looking that in the last 15 years in Britain, something in the order of 4,000 churches have been closed. Now, the argument is it's a lack of interest in, there's simply not enough people turning up for church services. So why keep them? That it didn't used to be a problem years ago. There'd be, and particularly in smaller towns in regional Australia, they would open up a church, and if even one or two people turned up, it was good enough. That there should be that religious presence was considered more important than the number of people who turned up. Now that's changed. Now, if you look at, say, the churches, Church of England in Britain, for example, or the Protestant churches, they're sitting on land that was worth not very much, way back when. Now they're sitting on, if you consider the graveyards and now they're sitting on land that's worth a lot of money from a real estate developer's point of view. So why would you keep the church? And I'm sure they're being pressured to do this by the government. Why would you keep the church open when there's hardly anyone turning up for services, when you can sell the land for millions? Why not do that? And then you can use that money to promote, getting lesbian priests or something. So I think a lot of the as it is in Australia, a lot of the closing of churches is for capitalising on the real estate. And that equation didn't exist, or certainly not to the same extent, didn't exist previously. So that's part of the reason why I think we see it happening. Similarly, the very rich Arab oil states are able to fund the building of quite lavish mosques all over the Western world, and they're not being hindered in that sense at all. They're being approved. Surprisingly, they're approved. When if you try to open up a Christian church, and I doubt that would get approval. So clearly, the spreading of Islam is seen as a suppression of Christianity, and for some reason, the globalists, well, not some reason, for obvious reasons, destruction of the family. The globalists see that the most dangerous, the biggest threat, or among the biggest threats to globalization, is Christianity. Thus, to diminish it or eradicate it or jeer and sneer at it is very much part of the thing. Is that part of the vacuum creating that brought affirmative action on, and is that what's making younger people sort of without a moral compass? I don't necessarily think so. I think the globalists were looking to impose their world order that required that Christianity be diminished and eradicated and again sneered at. The Christian religions didn't do themselves any favors by pedophile priests and all that sort of stuff. So, although I think a fair bit of that was invented. Similarly, if you look at the flock that the globalists are particularly mobilizing in support of globalization, gay, lesbian, Jews, that sort of thing. If you look at, they're particularly the prime movers, the frontline troops of the globalization project. The church, particularly the Catholic Church, has always been opposed to communists, homosexuals, lesbians, and Jews because they've always been the ones who were in support of the Marxist worldview. The Marxist worldview wanted to eradicate Christianity. The Christians, through the Catholic Church in particular, fought back and against these, and the leftists have never forgiven them for that. The Catholic Church in particular was seen as always an enemy of Jewish lesbians and homosexuals, and these people are of course at the forefront of academia now and activism in all sorts of minority group areas, and so they haven't forgotten that Christianity is their primary enemy or among their primary enemies, and so they're determined to bring about its eradication as well. So did in summary, or just concluding, is the lack of moral compass, the decline, diminishing of Christianity, is that what created the vacuum? No, I don't think so. I think the vacuum creation was actively being put in place by the globalist cabal, and that Christianity and the decline in moral compass happened concurrently. I think is more an accident of the globalist planning and implementation process than necessarily some rando vacuum into which a lack of moral compass appeared. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback Challenge. Thank you for listening.